I don't normally do unboxing videos on this channel, but this is kind of an unusual box. It comes from the German publisher Steidl, and it contains what you might call a book example of the Jurassic Park experiment of reviving something extinct from its genetic material. In this case, Steidl has tried to revive a historically important book in the history of graphic design and photography, which up till now has been almost completely unobtainable, and they're hoping to make it more widely available through a facsimile edition. I ordered it literally sight unseen. It was hellishly expensive, and I have never opened this package before, so one of the things that made this book particularly challenging was the history of the original work. Brodovich had published 500 copies of the book. In a fire at his farmhouse, all the original negatives, the original prints, and the original artboards all had been destroyed. So there was literally nothing from which you could produce a facsimile of this. What Steidl did to recreate the book was to get hold of 3 separate copies of the what remained from the 500 in as pristine a condition as possible, scanned each page individually, and then used a newly developed computer technique basically to average those 3 copies together to try to recapture the original appearance of the artwork. I have seen one of the original books. Back in the day, I was able to borrow one from my local public library through the interlibrary loan system. I have to say that many of these images do look very, very realistic in terms of how the actual book looked. I think it appears that Steidl has done an amazing job of reproducing the appearance of the original volume, even though there was absolutely nothing to draw on except existing copies. It's just an amazing thing. Probably no one except a really big name, which Brodovich was in the publishing industry, could have gotten away with producing something like this. In the late 1940s, photography in general was pretty well defined in terms of what people expected it to look like. People such as Edward Weston and Ansel Adams were widely respected in the art community. They believed in producing precious artworks that were as technically perfect as possible. There had been some movements in other directions, particularly in the ballet field. In the late 1930s, a woman named Merlin Severn, who later went on to become an important magazine photographer in Britain, produced this book called Ballet in Action, taking advantage of the then new Contax 2 camera, which was one of the first cameras that allowed what we call follow focusing. You can watch your subjects move around, in this case on a stage, and make action pictures keeping everything in focus. Most photography of ballet performers and performances in that era was very much like this by a man named Barron, who was a well-known theatrical and commercial photographer. He also tried doing some action photos, but he very much wanted to conform to the technical standards of magazine photography in that period. Brodovich obviously didn't worry about any of that, and he didn't have to. He was already a big name in the magazine field through his innovative work as art director for Harper's Bazaar, and he taught a class called the Design Lab, in which he was already grooming a new generation of more adventurous and more experimental photographers. So, way back in the 1930s, as a Russian immigrant in Paris, photographing the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo, he felt perfectly free to take the technical standards of the day, throw them out the window. It's clear looking at this book that what interested him about the Ballet Russe and about what he was photographing in his performances was not trying to represent what the ballet looked like or to meet the expectations of the publishing industry. As someone who had to flee Russia after the revolution, he found the Ballet Russe a tenuous link to home and very much a symbol of the kind of fleeting, impermanent existence that not only individual ballets have, but people such as himself had felt. It became an influence on people such as William Klein, whose book Life is Good and Good for You in New York appeared several years after this book, but embraced much of the same blurry, rushed, hurried, impermanent, imperfect vision. Another group of people who caught this ethos were the members of Japan's famous Provoke Collective, which became active in 1967 and 68. And like Klein and like Brodovich had pioneered, the Provoke artists were interested in using photography as photography. They had a shared view that in the Japan of the late 1960s, when people had very abruptly become obsessed by color television and glossy photo illustrated magazines, that society in general was losing the ability to distinguish between real experiences and media representations of experiences. And they felt that it was the job of artists to constantly remind people of the difference and, as one of them said, interrogate the boundary between experience and representation. So that's been an interesting journey, but basically it all began right here. Applause to Steidl for bringing it back. I think they've done a stunning job.